hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. And now your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. Now just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with is the one that says, love points the way and the law makes it possible. Love points the way and the law makes it possible. That phrase comes right out of our textbook written by our founder, Ernest Holmes. And what it means is this. Our desire, because in religious science talk, love is one of those words that has so many definitions, and very often it's reduced to the exchange between two people. But what I'm talking about here today when I'm talking about love is desire. It's a synonym of love here. Love points the way, and the law makes it possible. Love points the way is our ability to signal to God, to signal to Spirit, to signal to the universe that we are ready for something, that we want something. Our desire points the way, and spiritual principle makes it happen. Now here's the thing. Love will always point you the way to your good, always. And sometimes it's easy. It points it easy, and it comes to us easy. And sometimes love points the way through a lot of stuff that we have to get through in order to be able to get to our good. But we never want to water down our desire because of the hard stuff. We want to figure out how are we out of alignment. Because whenever our stuff is hard, it simply means we're out of alignment. Let me give you an example. I mentor a young minister in a different state. And she's starting a new church. She left the church in the same town and decided to start a new church. Very common happens because there are lots of Lutheran churches, and there's no reason why there can't be more than one religious science church. And so that wasn't the problem. The problem was that was her desire. Her love was to start a church and fill it up with people. So when she called for our appointment, I said, well, what have you done this week to fill up your church with people? She said, oh, I did a great thing. She said, I got the roster from my old church. And I wrote to all of them and told them how much better this church was going to be. See? Nothing wrong with her desire, but she was so outside of spiritual principle that it's going to be bumpy for her to get to the place where she's going. Now, before we get all judgmental about her, we've all done it. We've all done something, I want a man in my life, and I actually want Henry, the guy over there who's married to Shirley, We've all done that kind of stuff. Well, maybe not that kind of, I haven't, baby. I haven't done that kind of stuff, but some people might have done that kind of stuff. And if that's the case, then it's a bumpy ride, and we don't want you to have any kind of bumpy ride. But here's the thing. Before progress can be made, you have to have a desire. You must have a desire. Before you to move from here to there, you have to have desire. Love points the way, the law makes it possible. Now, our desire has to be strong enough to turn itself into an intention. And unfortunately, there are a lot of us in this room who have very weak desires that aren't going to make it to the benchmark of intention. And the reason some of us have weak desires is because in the past, we're afraid to have desires. We're afraid to want because in the past, maybe we've been disappointed because we didn't get what we want. Or maybe we have the faulty thinking that we're such screw-ups, we're not worthy of a strong desire in our life. Or maybe we think we're selfish. If we, why should I have a desire for something when other people don't have enough? That often happens in spiritual community. So those are some of the reasons that we have these weak desires that never make it to intention. But see, all of those things that I just mentioned are ignorance tales. We used to call them wives' tales. I don't like to call them wives' tales. We call them ignorance tales because they're not true. See, it's not true that you are not worthy. Whatever you have done up until this breath you are taking right now, God will not take into consideration in terms of your desire. God does not care. you are worthy. If you are breathing, you are worthy. I like to revisit this every once in a while. Breathing, worthy. Breathing, worthy. Breathing, worthy. Just a few of you. Breathing, worthy. Breathing, worthy. Okay, so let's keep that firm before us. If it's we don't let that make your desire weak. You know, and to that issue of I'm selfish because I have and somebody else doesn't have, the very thing you might be having right now, the very success you might be having in your life, it might be what is signaling somebody around you. You might not even know them. Maybe they're just looking at you. And you're signaling to them, I can do it. Maybe they can do it too. And that's what they're saying in their life. There's nothing selfish about success. It's important. You know, here's the thing. When it never occurred to me to live on a golf course until I saw somebody else living on a golf course. And then that became an intention for me. See, it's not, we get it, but here's the worst. The worst is disappointment. Your disappointment. Now I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about some ways that we can mitigate that disappointment by making sure that your desires get in harmony with spiritual principle, because once they're in harmony with spiritual principle, they come into fruition. We're going to talk about that, but in case you go to sleep in the next 30 seconds, let me tell you the quick answer to the whole issue of disappointment, and I don't want to be disappointed. Listen, you've been disappointed and you've lived through it. Everybody in this room has had a disappointment, and you have lived to see a better day. So don't let disappointment or your fear of disappointment just make your desire so weak it can't become an intention. But let's talk a little bit about how we can work within God's law, because that's what we're talking about today, really. We're working about, you know, if I were in a different kind of church, I'd say we have to obey God. We don't care for that. So what we say is we are in harmony with God's spiritual principle. And I want to talk a little bit about how we can get in harmony, because it's in our best interest. It's been our best interest to understand God's law and to get inside of it. So think about making an order on Amazon. See, and so you go on your internet, you tell your order, and you give them your credit card, and they tell you it'll be delivered in 3 days, okay? And then the next day you move. And in the move, you lose your credit card, so you call your credit card company and you tell them, you know what, you have to cancel my credit card. And then you think, oh my God, I'm not going to get my delivery from Amazon because I'm not ready to receive it. I'm not within the policies of how Amazon does its order. The same thing is true. You don't get mad at Amazon. You don't think Amazon doesn't love you because you didn't get your order. None of you think that. You just think, oh, I screwed up. Okay, let me call him, let me correct it. That's how we need to look at God. We don't need to get mad at God. We just need to figure out God's like UPS. We got to figure out how the UPS system, the spiritual UPS system, is going to work in our lives. So let's look at a few things we can make sure we're doing to stay within the harmony of spiritual principle. And the first one is to take 100% responsibility for your life. Not 98, not 99. 100% responsibility. And this includes your relationships, the results you have in your job, your state of health, your state of physical fitness, your income, your debt, your feelings, everything. We have to take 100% responsibility for it. Now, most of us are so conditioned to blaming things outside of ourselves for all parts of our life, like our media, our parents, our income, our lack of education, society. We find someone else we can pin the blame on. And there are a lot of people who will welcome that kind of talk. We need to say, oh, I thank you for the invitation to start complaining and blaming other people, but I really want to move ahead in my life. I want to be able to have my desire met. I'm going to take a pass on doing that. You know, here is the thing. Many of you have heard me talk about Nasrudin. Nasrudin is the character that the Sufis use. The Sufi is the branch of Muslims, and what they do is they have this one character, and poor Sufi, he does everything wrong, and they tell stories about him, and they're teaching stories. And one of the teaching stories I like the best is Nasrudin has lost his keys, and so he's looking out in front of his house for his keys, and he's just digging in the dirt, looking for the keys all over. And a friend of Nasrudin's comes by and says, Nasrudin, what are you doing? And he says, I've lost my keys. And the friend says, well, let me help you. And so he gets down and they're digging for about a half an hour in the dirt, looking all over the house, outside of the house for the keys. And finally the friend says, Nasrudin, they're not here. Are you sure you lost them here? And he says, oh no, I didn't lose them here. I lost them in the house, but there's more light out here. See? The point of the story is we're always looking out there for something when we need to be looking inside of us. Many of you heard the great baseball great Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb was a great batter, and when he was about 70 years old, a guy came up to him and said, Ty, what do you think right now? What do you think your batting average would be? And Ty Cobb said, well, you know, I used to bat 375. I think probably my batting average now would be about 280, maybe 290, but probably around 280. And so the guy who's interviewing him says, well, why is that? Is it because of the new turf, or because there's so much more night travel now, or because there are the new pitches that have come out? You know, the slider wasn't part of what they did when you were batting. What is it? And he said, it's none of that stuff out there. He said, it's because I'm 70 years old. See? He was willing to take responsibility for what was inside of him. See, there are conditions out there that exist that will make this more challenging, make your desire more challenging perhaps for you. You know, there's all kinds of conditions. There's the economy. Maybe there's lack of education. Maybe there's racism or homophobia or ageism or sizeism or any of those other isms that will make it more difficult. All of those can be a factor, but they can never be the deciding factor in our life. And that's important for us to get really deep. You know, if it were true, then then people who have filled great desires for both themselves and the planet would not have done so if they let those challenges take them down. You know, Jackie Robinson would never have played baseball. Barbara Boxer would never have been the Speaker of the House. Denzel Washington wouldn't have just received the Lifetime Achievement Award for the Golden Globes. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King wouldn't have changed the face of our work around racism if they had let those other challenges take them down. See, what we have to begin to understand is that our dreams can only become a reality when first we have a desire and then we allow ourselves to work within God's operating system. So taking 100% responsibility for our lives means for us that we have to give up blaming. To work with that presence of God that is within us, we have to acknowledge that we, me, I, you, have created the situation that we're in right now. Now, it doesn't mean that things don't happen to us. It doesn't mean that other people might have a part. But ultimately, it is our responsibility, and only our responsibility, to be able to make these kinds of changes, because we create our feelings and we make choices in our responses. Here's what late Wayne Dyer says: you will never become successful as long as you continue to blame someone or something else for your lack of success. If you're going to be a winner, you have to acknowledge the truth. It is you who took the actions, the thoughts, created the feelings, and made the choices that got you where you are today. It is up to you. You are the one who ate the junk food. You are the one who didn't say no. You are the one who took the job. You are the one who stayed in the job. You were the one who chose to believe them. You were the one who ignored your intuition. You were the one who abandoned your dream. You were the one who bought it. You were the one who didn't take care of it. You were the one who decided you had to do it alone. You were the one who trusted him. You were the one who said yes to the dogs. When we can begin to get that and really hold ourselves accountable to the fact that it is us who have to take responsibility for those things that are happening in our lives. In order to give 100%, you have to give up complaining. Not only blaming, but also complaining. Because your desire will not come closer to you, to manifestation, if you're complaining all the time. See, here's the truth. Your good shuns ugly. And when we start complaining, we get ugly inside. And when we get ugly inside, our good just runs away from us. Many of you remember the 1994 earthquake in Los Angeles. There was traffic in Los Angeles on freeways as crazy as it is, and it used to take an hour to get somewhere, and now it was taking, while they were cleaning up the earthquake, it was taking 2 and 3 hours and 4 hours sometimes. And a CNN reporter got in the middle of one of those traffic jams, and he knocked on the window of one of the cars, and the guy rolled down the window and he said, "How are you doing?" The guy said, "I hate California." He said, "First the floods, then the earthquakes. I hate this place." And the guy said, "Okay." He walks to the next window behind him and knocks on the window, and he said, "How you doing?" He said, "I'm doing okay." He said, I knew it was going to be like this, so I started out at 5 this morning. Even if I'm late for work, my boss, what can he say? I did the best I could. He said, "I've got my Spanish language tapes with me. I've got a thermos with me. I bought an extra sandwich in case I get stuck here with me, and some snacks." He said, I'm actually doing all right. Now, of those two people, who would you rather be a co-worker with? You would rather be a co-worker with the second guy, because he was willing to take responsibility for what's going on. Love points the way. The law makes it possible. See, and part of that means that we have to start believing in ourselves. We have to give up that "I can't," that phrase "I can't," or its cousins, "I wish it was like," or "I wish, I wish, I wish." See, if you watch a toddler try to climb, a toddler will climb up on anything. If they're not supervised, there is no barrier. They'll just climb up on anything, and they'll just try it and try it and try it and try it. And it's only when big people like us, who are concerned for their safety, get involved that they stop trying. Big people like us, we tend to bring down their level of invincibility. Our work is to bring that level of invincibility back up within safety, but to bring it back up in our lives. When we believe that the operating system is operating for us, not against us, we can do anything our mind is set to do. Now, if I were going to say, I think I've said some pretty important things here today. That's the most important thing I'm going to say all day. And that is, whatever your mind is set to do, you can do it. Now, it takes some stuff. It takes some practice. The latest brain research says that if you will practice positive thinking, this is brain research. This isn't just a metaphysician. This is brain research. If you will positive thinking and positive talk, and if you will practice believing in yourself, there's absolutely nothing that you can't learn and do. My cue cards got left here. Jack Canfield once said this. Jack Canfield once said that over the hundreds of successful people that he had interviewed, almost every one of them told him, I'm not as gifted or talented person in my field, but I chose to believe in myself. I chose to believe that anything was possible. Over the hundreds of people that he interviewed, They all said, I'm not the most, the brightest person in my field, but I chose to believe, or the talented, but I chose to believe that anything is possible. I study harder. I practice more than others to get where I am. I want to conclude with a story from one of Jack Canfield's books. And it's about this idea of beginning to believe in yourself, no matter what anybody else is telling you about yourself. Stephen Canfield failed 1st, 4th, and 10th grades. He couldn't read and comprehend like the other kids in the class could. He would spend 5 hours with his mother studying for a test, and then he would fail it. When he asked his friend who got an A how he had studied for the test, he replied, "I didn't." Stephen concluded he simply wasn't intelligent. But I simply decided as an act of will to put it out of my mind. Instead, I focused on energies that I was good at, and that was football. If it hadn't been for football, which I excelled at, I don't know what would have happened to me. I got my self-esteem from playing sports. Putting all his energy into football, he earned interscholastic honors as a running back. From football, he learned that if he applied himself, he could achieve excellence. See, the point isn't, it could have been anything. It could have been bridge. It could have been anything, piano playing. For him, it was football. But from those little successes, he got the idea that if he applied himself, he could achieve success. Later, he was able to transfer that belief in himself to his career, which oddly enough turned out to be writing scripts for television. Eventually, he formed his own production studio where he created, produced, and wrote over 350 scripts for 38 different shows, including The A-Team, The Redford Files, Beretta, 21 Jump Street, The Commish, Renegade, and Silk Stockings. At the height of his studio career, he had over 2,000 people on his payroll. And if that wasn't enough, he sold his studio. He went on to write 11 best-selling novels. Now, this is a guy who failed the 1st, 4th, and 10th grade. But somewhere along the line, he had something that allowed himself to believe in himself. And when he did that, then he could take his desire and make it stronger and get within spiritual principles, harmonizing with spiritual principles to make his desire into fruition. I'm going to be spending this week and next week talking about this idea. So I hope you'll come back next week because we're going to talk about some more ways that I think will help us stay within spiritual principle. But right now, let's take this message into prayer. Knowing that there's only one power, it's the power of love. It's the power of goodness, it's the power of sneeze, it's the power of all expression. For God works through us and can only do for us what God can do through us. I give thanks for that understanding. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so.